What is Curaçao? On June 14th at the World Cup, a name appeared that made the entire world stop and ask, who is that? Their opponent that day was Germany, four-time world champions, 84 million people, a footballing machine. And on the other side of the pitch, a population of just 156,000, a territory of only 444 square kilometers. The smallest nation, by both land and population, ever to qualify for a World Cup in its 90-year history. For 90 minutes, the biggest country and the smallest country would stand on exactly the same patch of grass. Equal footing. That's the strange, beautiful math of football. So where is Curaçao exactly? 65 kilometers off the coast of Venezuela, the southernmost tip of the Caribbean and the largest island in its chain. 28 degrees year-round, sitting just outside the hurricane belt. Good weather every single day of the year. The locals speak Papiamento, a language born from a mix of tongues. Dutch and English are spoken too. The economy runs on three things: cruise tourism, offshore finance, and the ghost of a century-old oil refinery that no longer runs. GDP per capita sits close to $20,000, one of the highest in the Caribbean. And you've probably tasted this island before, without knowing it. That bright blue bottle behind every bar? Blue Curaçao, named after this exact island, made from the dried peel of a bitter local orange. But here's the strangest thing about Curaçao. It isn't fully a sovereign country. It's a constituent country under the crown of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, not owned by the Netherlands but bound to it. On paper, Curaçao stands equal to the Netherlands itself within that kingdom. In practice, the kingdom's government is essentially the Dutch cabinet. And at the United Nations, it isn't Curaçao that holds a seat, it's the Kingdom of the Netherlands. The people of Curaçao have voted on this more than once, and most of them, every time, choose to stay. Let The Hague handle the finances, let The Hague handle the housing. It's a quiet kind of survival wisdom. Small island, big protector. Now let's go back 400 years, because Curaçao has broken its own rice bowl 3 times, and is now attempting a 4th, one nobody saw coming. Chapter 1. The Slave Dock, 1634 to 1863. In 1634, the Dutch West India Company seized the island from Spain. Not for farming, the land was too dry, too barren, even sugarcane couldn't survive here. They wanted the harbor, deep water, sheltered, sitting right at the gateway to South America. So Willemstad became a warehouse, a resale port. Across more than a century, over 100,000 Africans were brought through this harbor, sold and shipped out across the Americas. Today, those same harbor buildings are painted in candy colors, postcard perfect. In 1997, UNESCO added them to the World Heritage List. Tourists take photos on the very docks where once human beings were priced and sold. In 1863, the Netherlands abolished slavery. The trade stopped, and for the next 50 years, Curaçao became little more than a dot on the map. Quiet, forgotten. Chapter 2. The Century of Oil. 1915 to 1985. Then, luck came knocking. A massive oil field was discovered just across the water in Venezuela. But Venezuela's politics were too unstable for foreign companies to build refineries there. So Shell looked 65 kilometers away to a deep, safe harbor, flying a neutral Dutch flag. The Isla refinery rose almost overnight, and the island became a machine. At its peak, it refined over 300,000 barrels of crude a day. During the Second World War, this refinery kept Allied planes fueled, so vital that German submarines came hunting for it, shelling the coastline in February 1942. Workers poured in from Suriname and across the Caribbean. For a while, Curaçao had one of the highest standards of living in the entire region. Then came May 30th, 1969. Refinery workers demanded equal pay for equal work. The protest turned into a riot. Half of Willemstad burned. Dutch Marines landed to restore order. Locals still call it simply 30 de May. 30 May. It was the day the island's black population first asked out loud, "Who are we really?" The real collapse came in 1985, after the global oil shock. Refining stopped being profitable. Shell walked away, selling the entire refinery for a symbolic 1 guilder. The government leased it out to Venezuela's state oil company instead, a life support machine for a dying industry. Chapter 3. Selling the View, 1985 to 2019. A third rice bowl replaced the second, offshore finance and tourism. Low taxes drew thousands of shell companies to register their addresses here. Entire office buildings covered in nameplates with hardly a soul inside. Meanwhile, that same shelter from hurricanes, that same good weather kept the cruise ships coming. It held together until Venezuela's economy collapsed in 2019. The refinery lease went dark. 100 years of oil finally extinguished. Unemployment climbed into double digits. In 400 years, this island has broken 3 rice bowls, selling people, refining oil, selling scenery, and each collapse sent people fleeing. Today, there are almost as many Curaçaoans living in the Netherlands as there are on the island itself, about 150,000 on each side. One country split across 2 halves of the world. By every old rule of small nation survival, that should have been the end of this story. But Curaçao found a 4th rice bowl. Nobody saw it coming. In 2010, the old colonial framework governing the Dutch Caribbean was dissolved, and Curaçao emerged as its own constituent country, inheriting almost as an afterthought its own seat in FIFA. FIFA has 211 members. That's 18 more than the United Nations. And under FIFA's rules, a player only has to choose once. Never having played an official match for another country, you're free to switch. So the children of the diaspora, those who couldn't quite break into the Dutch national team, found a second path home. Tahith Chong from Manchester United's academy. Juninho Bacuna playing in the Premier League with Aston Villa. By this past March, 15 players with Dutch youth team caps were wearing Curaçao's jersey instead. The squad's market value, nearly 13 million euros, twice that of the team that had beaten them just months earlier. Journalists began calling them, half-joking, the Netherlands' third team. The man who paved the road back was a Dutch legend, Patrick Kluivert, whose father was from Curaçao. In 2015, he came to the island himself to coach D, and one by one he began calling the children of the diaspora home. Through 2025 qualifying, Curaçao stayed unbeaten, past Jamaica, past Trinidad and Tobago. On a rainy night in Kingston, a scoreless draw against Jamaica sealed it. Qualification. Watching from across the Atlantic was another name, Dick Advocat, who'd stepped away for family health reasons. He'd only just returned to coaching at 78 years old, 32 years after leading the Netherlands to a World Cup, now guiding the children of a former colony back onto football's biggest stage, the oldest head coach in World Cup history. Preparation wasn't smooth. A warm-up loss, 4-1 to Scotland, but before departure, a 4-0 send-off win over neighbouring Aruba, and a farewell match at home, packed to more than 10,000 seats, roughly a tenth of the entire population. So looking back, losing narrowly to a stronger side months earlier, that was never anything to be ashamed of. Now comes Germany, 84 million against 156,000. Curaçao arrives ranked 81st, dead last among the 48 teams at this World Cup. But simply standing on that touchline, that already is a kind of victory. For 400 years, this island exported people. Then it exported oil. Then it exported overworked labor. Now it's exporting something else entirely. Young players raised in Dutch academies coming home to play for a country that on paper isn't even fully a country. Curaçao has no army, no embassies around the world. Its passport still reads Kingdom of the Netherlands. But for 90 minutes, on a green rectangle of grass, none of that matters. When Curaçao sings its anthem before kickoff, 156,000 people will be seen for the first time by the entire world as a whole nation. That's the beauty of football. For 90 minutes, every country is exactly the same size. One more island is walking this same road, Cape Verde, another chain of volcanic islands, this time in the Atlantic. Population just over 500,000. Also once a transit stop in the slave trade, also carried to its first World Cup by the children of its diaspora scattered across Europe. 2 islands, an ocean apart, living out the very same story of football and of national fortune. See you next time.